So we're looking at, a year ago we had one period timetabled for ICT and CS. And we were being inspected and realised we needed to do something about ICT across the school, and one period wasn't enough to do anything meaningful. So we changed it. And now we have no ICT. So we've gone from one period to none, but that's fine, because what we instead do is we instead had to look at how on earth do we then teach ICT across ICT. So we want to teach the CS outcomes as well as the ICT. So the ICT outcomes, just to refresh your memory, if you, or if you're unfamiliar with them, so you have to, I've summarised them a bit. You have to learn some new software, you have to do some searching skills, you have to use different computer technology, using ICT in different ways, and being creative with digital media. With computing science, you have to be safe online, you have to build some sort of multimedia digital solution for communicating, you have to look at computer hardware, designing a game with control or interactive multimedia, and making a game or animation. So we started looking at, right, well we can do some things in English. So we can take pupils out of English, or we can work with English teachers and work together with them. Or we can work with the German teachers and design a game in German. We can work with the social subjects team, and so on it went. So we work in a way where we work with the teachers and we pull them out those subjects and work in the computer labs, or we go and support those teachers in their classrooms. So we're going to talk to you about a lot of the projects that we've done across the year.
Well, when I was first told this, I was looking for an idea for the first one, and I was covering in social subjects, and I saw on the wall there were maps. And I've always had a fascination with maps for game worlds and as locations for stuff takes place. And I started thinking we could do the map stuff in social subjects and look at north, south, east and west, and we could take those maps and we could build a game in that world, in the world that had been created by the students and their maps. So here's an example of one of the maps I came up with, nice example, just some places on some islands, north, south, east and west, and they learned the directions, and they did learn keys and stuff, but they didn't use anything, they just drew the pictures on the maps. And then we brought them to computing, and we started to look at building it into a game. And my first forays into computer games when I was a kid, designing text adventures in BASIC. So I thought we'd get the kids to do some text adventures. Not in BASIC, I wasn't that mean to them. So we used a piece of software called Inform 7 to do this. And the first step was we took all the places on the map and said where they were in relation to the other places. So the field is south of the castle, the pond is south-east of the beach. So they had to think back to what they did in social subjects about directions and kind of work backwards, because you're saying this place is somewhere from over there, not I need to go this way to get there. So that was a bit of a tricky one, but it helped reinforce what we've done. Once we had this, we typed that up and it builds a digital version of the map. Then we started work with the English department. Now, each of these places needed a description. It needed to let the player of the game know what it was like to be at the beach, or in the castle, or in the field. And to do that, they sat and they wrote the description in English, and we looked at using the 5 senses to describe the places. And we came up with some descriptions like this. They're cut off because my monitor was really wide when I took the screenshots of it, and they didn't fit on the screen big enough for you guys to be able to read. So they wrote a description of it, and they had to tell us which way you could go from each place. So they sat down and they wrote all this in English, and the English teachers would have marked it probably after what was put on the board here. But we worked with the English department, they wrote this, and then we came down and they typed it all in, and it built a digital version of their map. So they could look and they could see that this is what the computer thinks their map looks like, and they could try and fix it if they've made mistakes, because occasionally you get a couple of places appearing down here because they're not connected to anywhere because they've made a spelling mistake or they'd spelled it differently in 2 different places. Once we had that, they were going to add the game element of playing through the games, but we ran out of time in the unit, so that's going to be in it this year. We've got our timing a little bit better now. So they played through each other's worlds just as a walk through a world where you could go through the descriptions, they could play through, they could wander around the world, they could take part in the world, and it would look a bit like this. So you get a description, it tells you where you can go, you travel in the direction. And they quite enjoyed this, they thought it was quite fun. There was a little bit of grumbling at the start because there's no Call of Duty style graphics and it's not movie quality sounds and stuff. But they did get used to it and they enjoyed it. And this is something that continues through to my seniors in the computer games development course were working on their text adventure games, and this is one of their maps. Fortunately, she's an artist, so I get some quite good quality work out of her when it comes to the art type things. So this is hers and her stories now finished, and it's actually really enjoyable to play. Then, on the same card are social subjects, maths, and I was walking past maths, and they were doing probability. And I love board games. Board games are fantastic, I really enjoy them, they're a great activity, and I'd started playing board games with students at lunchtimes as a club, and they'd come along and they'd play it. And I saw probability and I thought, we could do some board games for this. So I went into maths, and we used a game called Formula D. So a Formula 1 racing game, and it uses dice. And the dice are weighted differently to represent being in different gears. So the 4-sided dice, the yellow one, you can only roll a 1 or a 2 on it. And the 30-sided dice, you can only roll between 21 and 30. So the students have to think about what's the probability of rolling certain numbers on the dice. And the game stops being just who can get rolling the big dice and roll the largest numbers quickest by adding in corners. So they have to stop a certain number of times in the methods. So we're looking at probabilities, chances, risk management kind of things to get around the course as fast as possible. Now, earlier in the year we had a school-wide numeracy project called Graph Week, where we took part in, well, not we, me and the math teacher had a race to school. We both cycled to school, so we tracked how long it took us to race to school and plotted that against each other. And we brought this in with the other year group by doing distance, the speed time graphs with the students. So we used Excel to chart these and look at different types of graph in Excel and how to use Excel to track data so that we could use it again in science and other things like that. And this is 3 players racing around a track. We then went back and we looked at it the other way and said, if you take a graph like this, tell me something about the track. So is it a big track with lots of open corners where you're just going as fast as possible, or are there lots of tight winding corners? So we went back and gave them graphs and they had to try and work out what type of track it was. So that was the first 2 projects we did, and then Kate's going to talk about what we did with the art.
So we've always done, in fact I realise we've got a clicker, sorry. We've always done animation with our classes, but this time round we worked with the art department. And I don't know why I'm surprised, but the quality just was incredible compared to computing teachers trying to teach making clay models and sets. It seems the art department know what they're talking about, of course they do. So it was brilliant to see some of the stunning models that were coming out from the art department. So we worked with the art teachers to design characters, to design a set, to make the characters in clay. And we storyboarded a film, and then we filmed it. We did stop motion animations in Comic Life. So we filmed that in the computing department. And we talked about how to do sort of repeated processes and reversing it and duplicating it and things as well. So we looked at that as we were doing filming. We then worked with the music department. So we took our finished films, we added a few sound effects on, but we then took the films to the music department. We used used GarageBand and they made a soundtrack. So we gave them a different animation first of all, so they all got the same animation, stripped the sound off it and got them to make a soundtrack for that. And it was really nice seeing how different the emotions could be in a film, just depending on the music that they put on. And then they made the soundtrack for their own films as well. And that worked. It was quite a nice project for that.
And I'll just add for that music, we did it right at the end of second year, once they'd made their choices, once they'd done all that kind of stuff. And it's usually a really hard time to teach second year once they've decided they're not doing the subjects or not. And it's the most fun I've had with the second year during that time. Just me and the music teacher both thought it was great. There was no wrestling with this isn't what we want to be doing. We just got through it and it was really enjoyable to teach that. But paper creations, cardboard in disguise. This was another one with the art department. I was sat in the art department talking to the head of art. I have no idea of what we were talking about or what was said, but I came away from it with permission to do a Papercraft day type character creation unit with first years in art. So this was just before the Easter holidays, and I said, we'll do it when we get back. We'll just start first day back. Probably a little bit ambitious, but it was great fun. So what we did was we started by, in the art department just at a desk, having students design their characters. So they got given a blank outline of what it would look like in the end, and they had to sit and design their own character. Here we have a computer game inspired one, and once they'd done that, they had to deconstruct the 3D image and build it into its nets. And this fit really nicely with what they were doing in maths at the time, because they were doing 3D shape and nets and deconstructing them, and that fit nicely in with maths. Then we scanned in their 3D net. So they drew the 3D, they drew the 2D net, then they went over it with a black pen so the scanner would be able to pick it up properly, and we scanned it in. Then we used paint.net to mask off the areas and colour them in. So we looked at the hardware of scanners and how you could use it to digitise a non-digital picture. And then we looked at masking off areas in paint.net and colouring in these. We then, well, there's a couple of examples to go past. We then printed these out onto card, and students had to cut around them and assemble them. And there's some examples up there, and there's a pile of them on the desk down here. So a really fun unit to do. I had a great time doing it, and the students really liked their creations. We do have a problem in that they hound me to get them back, and I've been keeping them for presentations like this because I like to show them off. So every time I teach them in second year, they come and go, "Can we get our characters back?" Oh. Go, after the Scottish Learning Festival, after the computing conference. So I think I'm just going to have to give them back, and we'll just do it with pictures from now on.
We also did the extension task.
Oh yeah, and the extension task when we got that was we started looking at bringing the character outside of the shape. So we looked at popping out ears and adding in sticky up bits of hair and these kind of things to the character. So they had to think on their own about how the net could be transformed to produce them. So the hair is drawn separately, coloured in separately, a slit's put in the top of the head and the hair slipped into that, whereas the ears are just drawn on and then the lines are cut around and just pop out.
We went and worked with the English department again. We worked with them with the first years.
I was shouting that side up for the wrong one.
I had a book that I was reading with my boy, and as soon as I saw this book, I had to get it. And what I love about it is that it plays about with the typeface and makes it into a kind of character. So blurring it and whooshing it and things. And I thought this would be a really nice project to do with the first years. So we did a bit of story writing with them. So we we wrote a story first of all, and worked with English Department. They helped work with the pupils to write the story, and they changed the grammar and all that sort of thing. We then typed it in to Word and then copied and pasted it into a website called Aviary. And we then played with the typeface. So changing the font, changing the colours, changing the shape of the words, slanting them to give it emphasis. We then also added in illustrations, so the pupils added the illustrations. So the idea had been that we'd do something like a teddy, and I think we'll probably focus it more next year, a sort of teddy bear's journey or toy's journey. And that way, what we wanted them to do was take a photo of a toy, bring a toy in and have it in different positions and take photos of it, crop round it, and then put it onto other photos, source other photos and then put it onto that. So this is a photo of one girl's relatives. And a lot of the pupils wrote it for young children, young relatives that they knew. I think there was only one pupil who wasn't writing their story for somebody in particular. So it had a really nice touch to it there. So putting the teddy bear on top of a picture in different situations. We had one pupil who drew all the illustrations and then scanned them in, with somebody who did them all on just very basic computer art. And we had some pupils decided they wanted to do letters and numbers, and we ended up splitting it into 2 different books. So we've got one that's just letters, numbers, colours, and one that's actual stories. But they went and sourced all the illustrations as well and played about the text as well. So it was a really nice project, but what was lovely was to get a book at the end. We used a website called Blurb, and there's got 2 different ways of doing the desktop publishing. So you can either use a web app, in which case you don't have to install anything, or you can get a bit more advanced version of the software that you can download and install if you want to do things like playing around with the templates you're using. What was nice about this is we only had to pay for 1 set of books. We could show the kids, we read the stories to the kids, and they got to see them and feel them. They were then able to go and buy them. And so we didn't have to arrange people bringing in checks and pulling them all together and going and doing a bulk order, although you can get discounts if you get bulk orders. It's just even more than 10. But they went off and bought the books. If they wanted to buy them, they could buy them. If they wanted to download them onto an iOS device, an iPhone or an iPad, they could download that, and for £2 they could get an ebook version of it. Or it's on our school website, they could go and have a look at it on the school website. So there was no need to buy it. We didn't want there to be a need to buy, and we didn't want pressure of everybody getting their money in and feeling the left one out who didn't get their books. If they chose to buy it, it went to their home address and things. And they were then able to go and read it to the relatives, and read it to the little kids that they wrote the story for, which was great.
Fantastic foreign quiz game. Now we go to German. In school, students rotate year for which language they do. And I was really fortunate this time that we did German, because I could just about remember the German I did in high school for this. We built a Who Wants to Be a Millionaire style multiple choice answer quiz game. And we started in the German classroom. They sat down and they came up with their questions and worked on doing them in German. So we'd end up with a German question with English answers, or a German question with German answers, or an English question with German answers, or questions with picture answers, and these kind of things. One of them was which of these is a rugby ball in German, and then a picture of a brick, an American football, a football, and a rugby ball. And somebody got the code wrong, so the brick was the right answer to that question. This task was differentiated across the different sets in German because of their abilities in German. So the top set wrote the questions, so they came up with the actual questions and the answers. And then the top 2 sets did that. And then the bottom set were their German bit was kept to counting in numbers, because that was the limit of their German at the time. Was they could do the numbers and colours and these kind of things, but it's chosen just for them to do the numbers. So they did the lives. So this was like the lifelines in the top corner, and the score here. but they still had to write the code for it the same as everybody else. And what was really interesting was that the bottom German set found the coding a lot easier and were much more adept at thinking about the code and filling in the blanks in the code than the top set. The top set were alright at it, but I was expecting it to be a lot more difficult with the bottom set, but they really surprised me with that. So they got given the example code for a question, and then structure for the second question, and then the other 8 questions they had to piece together on their own how to do it based on what had happened beforehand. And some of them just took it straight away and they could get through the questions after doing a couple of example ones. Some took a little bit longer and had to puzzle all out with bits of paper and thinking on bits of paper, which I quite liked because I wasn't having to tell them what to do. So this was really fun, and then now in this year group in third year, when they're coming along, we're making scratch games Overkill, space-based shooter game, and it's quite fun. And they're much better at Scratch than my previous third years as well. Back to English. This was the great comic book unit. Seeing the books that had been made, I had the idea we could make comic books. And this all came from, there's a Superman comic that tells the Superman origin story on one page in several panels. And I thought we could do our own superhero alter egos, get 1 or 2 page origin stories for them, and then collect them together and get like a class book of superhero origins. It was a fantastic idea. We were going to use the stuff we learned earlier with the 5 senses and add in similes to talk about these kind of things and bring all that together, and it was going to be great. So here we had the first part of it, which was to describe your superhero. Using similes to help somebody draw your character. So this was English were working on giving detailed descriptions of people, and we wrote the descriptions and gave them to other people to draw. So art students or other students in the school or other people in the class, and they drew it based on the description. And then we got to give them back to the students and go, that's not what I said they looked like, and go back to their descriptions, and they'd missed out huge chunks of their descriptions. So we got more detailed descriptions. And then they wrote their origin story. And then the summer holidays came. So we never got to writing the panels and writing the descriptions for that, but we learned a lot about how long it took students to do the writing part of it. We underestimated how long it would take them for this level of creativity. So this year when we do it, we're going to start a little bit earlier and push them a little bit faster, because we didn't get to do a lot of the stuff we wanted to do. But this year we'll have some cool comic books.
So yeah, I mean, the departments we worked in are these ones. So we worked in social subjects and maths and English and German and music and art. This year the plan is to progress that on, so that we're going to do things like presentations with the comic department and with the RMP, religion, what we call it?
Religious, moral and philosophical education.
Yes. And we're going to work with PSC and do more internet safety. We're very conscious that we're not doing enough on that side of things, so we want to get an internet safety plan throughout the years. What other subjects are we doing? CDT. So we want to do. We want to do internet safety with PSC, presentations in different subjects, but we don't want to just do PowerPoint. We want to focus on the actual standing up and talking and communication skills as well. I quite like to use things like Prezi and just vary how we're doing the technical side of things, but focusing on the human side of things as well. We want to work with CDT and the science department, doing a kind of eco-homes project. I was involved in a project across in New York with Second Life, and we're trying to adapt that project to fit, instead of Second Life, to fit Google SketchUp. So looking at how much waste they use in a household, how much they recycle, how much food they use, what kind of materials is their home made out of, and to then build their home in SketchUp and design that, and how could you then make that more ecologically friendly? Can you put like solar panels on the roof? Can you chuck a wind turbine on the roof or in the back garden? So we're looking at doing that. Another project with the CDT department is we want to do use Lego WeDo sensors and controllers. I don't know if you've come across Lego WeDo. It's aimed at primary age kids. It's sort of a pre-Mindstorm thing. But it has these sensors. It has a tilt sensor and a light sensor, a distance sensor, that you can use to then make, so you can then use to control in Scratch. I forgot to bring the controller, that's why I didn't have a picture of it. I made this it was very Swish design. Yeah, it's cardboard. So you could turn it into something like a Wiimote, so that when you twist it, it controls the game. Or when you press the button, you can turn the light sensor into a button, so when it's covered over. So it can tell the distance of sort of 100 to 0, but you can set it so that if it's less than 10, something happens. So you could change it so that it's controlling a spaceship and then firing a button. So we wanted to work with the CDT department to design the box for it, the control components for it, and then to design the game as well. Yeah, so we're progressing through. We're trying to work through as many of these projects as we can, and work through the curriculum. We're delighted if you want to get in touch with us and get more information. The presentation is available online. We're both on Twitter. Please Twitter us if you want to get information faster than emailing us. But we'd be delighted if anybody wants to get in touch and even suggest ideas to us as well. I have big gaps that we haven't realised. Cool.